Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Eggleston, and I run Course Report, which is a resource for students who are choosing a coding bootcamp. If you haven't looked at Course Report yet, this is my one shameless plug. I do it in all of our videos. You can use our directory to find schools that fit your learning style. You can check out our blog for interviews with students and instructors like this one, and founders at boot camps across the world. We've got application tips, virtual classroom tours, and tons more. And for the next few weeks, we are going to be sharing tours of online classrooms with you so that you can do your best research when you're trying to choose a bootcamp to go to online. And today, Jonathan Lewis from Reactor is here to walk us through the Reactor online classroom. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So as you know, a lot of boot camps are moving online in 2020. Reactor is a little bit different because they've actually offered a remote version of their immersive coding boot camp since 2014. So they've got 6 years of experience doing this. But because of COVID-19, Reactor has moved entirely online, and Jonathan is going to walk us through the differences between Reactor online versus in person. He's going to share his screen and give us a tour of the Reactor online classroom. And he will share some advice for students who are trying to really excel in an online boot camp and actually get a job when they graduate, which is the point. So Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. I have a ton of questions for you, but I want to start by asking a little bit about yourself. So how did you get into tech? Did you take a traditional path into software engineering?
My story is actually pretty similar to a lot of the students that we see come through Reactor and other boot camps. I had a degree in film production, an arts degree that I wasn't working in film production. I had various other jobs. I had started down a career path, and I came to that moment. I was like, what am I doing with my life? Right? And I think I need to switch careers. And with all the research I did, and maybe a lot of people who listen to this actually are at this point, you're like, I think I'm going to do software engineering. What would that mean? How do I do this? And I got it down where I realized, and I think you see the same, that doing a boot camp from all the data I had was the best route to give me the best chance of success. And as I continued to look and talk to alumni and go to webinars and things and look up data, I was like, okay, it looks like Reactor is pretty good. And after talking to a couple of alumni, I was like, all right, this seems pretty legit. Let me do this. So I did that program in 2017, and I graduated. I loved it so much because of the way that it works and how effective it is, that I wanted to help teach for, I think, 3 months, right? Sometimes you can opt in to be a student teacher. I did that, and then I did I felt I really got how this program works, and so I did a job search, applied to 5 companies, got offers from 2 of them, accepted an offer. It was 3 weeks, it was done. So then I started working in the industry, and at this point I've now worked for a couple of years in the industry.
Cool. That's so cool. You have a great kind of similar background to a lot of boot campers. And because of the pandemic, a lot of schools have moved online, but Reactor has kind of done this a little bit differently. So could you explain the difference between like Reactor Remote and the remote version of Reactor's classrooms in like LA, San Francisco, New York City? Because y'all are kind of keeping those separate, right?
Right. So, those campuses were originally on site, of course. And, we've had an online program, as you mentioned, since 2014. And, are iterating on how to do this effectively, because it is different. And, if you talk to anyone out there running a boot camp that's trying to transition from doing it on site to remotely, a lot, you can find pretty good ways to do it online, but there are differences. So, we hammered that out in the remote branch, in the remote campus, we hammered that out over the last, 6 years. And so as our other campuses went online, we've been working with them directly, right? So just like we have students pair program, we're working with these other campuses one-on-one and in groups and figuring out, okay, how do we implement some of the things that the remote campus has been doing? So by and large, they're adopting a lot of the specific methodologies that we've developed over the last few years. And what that really means is, they're doing basically the same things we are. And what's different that we're doing from when they were on site is, rather than, you walking into a classroom on time and sitting down with the group, you show up into a Zoom room on time, and we start having our lecture. And I mentioned that on time part because there's a big part of the program that's accountability, right? It's not an at your own pace program. Even though it's remote, we have absolutely the same level of accountability and the same level of interaction, actually, as you do on site. So what's different? When you disconnect from a Zoom room, you're not next to the person who just left the classroom, right? So there's little between times, but they are relatively short. And we try to supplement that with things like during lunchtime, you can join a group Zoom room and you can sort of chat. And some of those things are deliberate and some of those things are optional. On Saturdays, we have a night where everyone gets on Zoom and hangs out, whereas on site, we used to actually have people go to the same room. But by and large, every activity that was done on site, particularly in the Pacific time zone, we do the exact same thing at the exact same time, the same schedule for the entire cohort. So at any moment, we just got together in a lecture, or we just got together and started peer programming at the LA campus or the San Francisco campus, they were doing the exact same thing.
Okay, so as you've kind of, watched people do remote learning and even shift into remote learning over the last few months, what have you noticed that the most successful students have done as remote learners? Have you noticed things really stand out?
Yeah, I would say if so many of the students that we have been seeing in the remote program over the years were individuals who at least were willing to try the remote program, right? And so now we have many students who don't have another option. So because we have options that are campuses that used to be on site, you may see some bias for some students who feel like maybe it'll become on site when I am a student there, so I'll try it out, right? But the students who are successful, regardless of whether or not they think anything of a remote program before they join, is that, that's trusting the process is a big part of it, right? If you join the program and you're like, okay, I will take feedback. And that's another one. If you take and apply the feedback we give you, we work like coaches in the program, just like an athletic coach and a team, or whether you hire a professional trainer who's going to give you feedback based on what they observe about your performance in real time. If you apply that feedback, whether you're trying to lose weight or get fit, or you're trying to learn how to program, you are going to excel, right? So that's a huge one. And another one that coincides with that is a growth mindset, right? A lot of these things that characterize success have to do with things that aren't necessarily technical, right? Someone who comes in with high technical capability, that's actually not that strong of an indicator of how hireable they will be, how successful they will be. But if they come in, even if they're technically not strong, but they are happy to get feedback and they start messaging you, hey, I started doing that thing that you told me about, that you showed me. Here's a picture of me doing it with my partner. I started sharing it with everyone, right? That is an individual who will see like immeasurable success.
So, okay, so those are great like mindsets and kind of personality traits to embody if you want to be successful at an online boot camp. Are there like kind of logistical or like concrete things that you've seen successful students do, like maybe setting up their online workspace in a certain way?
Absolutely, right. So if you're gonna if you're going to do a program remotely, your working space is where you live or wherever you are, right? And so having a space that you can control and have it be comfortable, whether that's the humidity and the temperature are comfortable, the seat that you're using, having a keyboard and a mouse, an external keyboard and mouse, having two monitors so that you're able to deal with coding on one and researching on another, and that you tell your family. This is a really big one. Tell your family, loved ones, roommates, have a conversation with your pets if you need to about how you need to focus and work. And students who have that support, also a headset with both a microphone and headphones. students who are doing that are really able to focus and not be distracted by any other things, and be successful in the program.
Okay, that's fantastic. And how are y'all? You mentioned doing, lunchtime Zoom rooms and even Saturday night, like Zoom dinners. But how do you ensure that remote students are not missing out on anything that in-person students are getting? Like, I'm thinking about like a demo day or capstone projects. Like, are you doing all of that via Zoom and you're having like employers join online as well?
Yeah, so the way that we run the remote program is analogous to the way we were running on-site programs, right? And we were doing them in parallel since 2014 or so. And from the beginning, we were iterating on this remote program and finding out, how do we deliver the exact same outcomes. And in fact, that's a huge deal, even to Harsh Patel, the CEO, right? Him saying, we need to deliver the same results, the same outcomes, the same learning experience. So we've been problem solving this, right? Many of us are engineers, and just like you problem solve as a software engineer, we've been problem solving this and iterating on it. So how do we deliver on that, right? Well, when all the students, really what they're doing is they're gaining all of these skills by interacting with one another, pair programming. They're actually building, really, even in retrospect, when I think about my career, they're really building production quality applications which scale. They actually have to meet standards of building applications that can scale and handle 10 million records and 1,000 requests a second. They deploy these. They're accessible publicly. They're required to actually style the front end and handle all the animations and interactivity like it's a real professional working site. And so this is accessible on their LinkedIn, their resume. When they talk to any companies, this is what they're showing them. And any networking, a big part of the networking is our alumni network. Once you've gone through a program like this is intense. And I've been through Marine Corps boot camp, actually, and this program is definitely mentally incredibly exhausting, right? Marine Corps boot camps, incredibly difficult physically, mentally also, but the amount of problem solving, like the amount you use this part of your brain right here in this program is incredible. And so, that creates this incredibly strong community. I'm not part of another community that's as supportive as the alumni in this program. I still have meetings with them. We do toy problems. We meet up and we talk about interviews we've had, and we coach each other, right? Like, this is the kind of community that this program breeds. So you've got that. Plus, we've also got an internal recruiting team. There are companies that love Hack Reactor grads. Some of them now are Hack Reactor grads who are hiring Hack Reactor grads, right? And so we actually have an internal team which works with those companies, and we get them interviews with those companies, and they give us feedback about what they think of our grads, and we actually adjust our curriculum according to that too. So we have these really tight networks internally among alumni, and constantly iterating on how we deliver the same kind of results.
I also love that you mentioned building projects remotely, because I feel like in a world where remote work is just becoming more important than ever, it seems like learning to build those projects remotely is really good practice. So could you share your screen and show us maybe what that kind of looks like in real life? What does the remote classroom actually look like at Hack Reactor?
All right. You'll get a peek behind the curtain here. At a glance, you can see the calendar is pretty packed, right? There is a lot of activity. There is roughly about 66 hours a week of curriculum. I mentioned accountability. It is highly structured, highly scheduled. There is little bits of time when there's time that's flexible, but by and large, we're ensuring that students are successful because they do the work. And here it is laid out. So students start the day with a kickoff, a live lecture. I may lead that. One of our counselors may lead that. And as you can see, this is actually the calendar for this week. And they've got things like verbalization practice. This is the kitchen time during lunchtime. So it's optional for them to join this room and chit chat with one another. There's time to work out for self-care. But by and large, you'll see these sections of pairing work. This is them together, pair programming. This is an example of a lecture on toy problems in the morning. So in the morning, when they do the toy problems, we'll reflect on the problem from the day before. So every day you're being exposed to, and you have to solve problems that are real world, like problems that you need to solve in coding interviews, right? So by the end of the program, I think they'll have done over 60 of these. And these are like the wind sprints for anyone who has any idea of like athletics. These are like the wind sprints of programming, right? Every morning you're getting out there, you're sweating, and you're building your endurance. This is an example of kind of what it looks like when we're doing a lecture or we're doing any sort of full cohort activity. Everyone's connected together on Zoom. Everyone is at good time. There's
Maybe in a tuxedo.
Wait, what?
Maybe even in a tuxedo, like this guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, exactly. So this is probably a presentation. And so, you know, students wanting to look good for a presentation, right?
Love it.
You're using VS Code and you're actually live code sharing. So this is an example of students pair programming. And that is, you know, you're practicing the ability to communicate about your code, to understand when someone else is communicating with you. And the code is shared live. So as you type into the code, it updates live on the other person's computer. So sometimes we get the question of like, if you're not side by side, how do you share code? It happens live, right? As you type, if I type a comment, that's immediately in the other person's code. So this is our Learn platform. So this keeps track of student progress, and you can kind of see, you know, there's a limited number of resources that are available at a time, so that gets released incrementally so students don't get lost. And if we dig down and we go into some of these modules, students have access to videos, slideshows, access to instructions on how to complete sprints. This is where the majority of curriculum is released, and students, we can actually see the students' progress as well.
How cool. So you're using a lot of external tools, Zoom, VS Code, Google Calendar, obviously, but you also have this kind of like proprietary platform that's just for the remote students.
Absolutely.
That's really cool.
And students are actually working like a real life working environment. When they're seniors in the program in their second half, we act as sort of a project manager as they're working in small teams. This is really similar to the way a lot of big companies work, where a small team takes ownership over delivering a product or delivering some sort of a feature. So they work in that way. They make pull requests, and they review each other on those pull requests. And they do test-driven development, right? I think that about sums it up for, you know, what the
very cool
experience is like. Yeah.
And how do students communicate with each other? Is it all through Zoom? Are you expecting someone in the program to like sign on to Zoom in the morning, and then they're pretty much on Zoom until the evening until they sign off? Or is there any kind of like asynchronous, you know, Slack or other types of communication?
So students are probably on video the majority of the day in different scenarios. However, we do have Slack. Students communicate constantly over Slack, and that's a great point. That it's the way students communicate asynchronously, as well as to just have things that are persistent. Like there's a gratitudes channel, there's a channel on reflections, a channel for every class that we have. We have channels to interact with students so that the staff can keep track of student interactions. This goes back to, you know, how do you have an online program? It is phenomenal to look at the amount of detail that goes into something like how you communicate with students, and how do you track all of that? How do you track all of this data, right? Particularly the communication. And yeah, we use Slack, and it is optimized for, you know, a remote experience.
And what is your teaching style, Jonathan? Like, do you feel like as an online instructor that you can have like your own individual teaching style?
You know, absolutely. It's funny because I've done a whole lot more teaching remotely than I have in person at this point. And so it feels incredibly natural. So the difference really is that making eye contact is difficult, and the engagement, people have a tendency to be less engaged. So there's a little barrier to overcome. And so just like we adapt to everything else, we just adapt to that. So we regularly ask for responses from students. I will prompt them and I will say, hey, let's answer this question. Everyone answer this. And I'll show some code on the screen. I'll say, what does line 46 evaluate to? Send me a private chat in Zoom, what that evaluates to. We track student interaction, and it's not so much about students getting the right answer, but it's more about student engagement, right? So we track engagement, and again, we give students feedback on engagement. So that's one of the things that being in a remote program, you develop. Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, you mentioned iteration a lot before. I'm curious, I was going to ask what like the biggest, lesson your team has learned about teaching online in the last few years has been. But because you actually took Hack Reactor in 2017, I'm curious what the biggest change you've seen since you graduated in 2017 has been. Has there been a big iteration since then?
I'm so impressed because when I did the program, it's, you could say I'm biased. Obviously, I'm going to be biased, but the reason I work here is because I am so impressed by it and so impressed by the staff, right? And, in many ways, I'm humbled by the staff. And then that's why I'm here. And when I was in the program, I didn't have a lot of visibility. It was all internal, right? So then when I was a staff member directly afterwards, a teaching assistant, it's like, wow, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. I was humbled by the amount of energy the staff spend to try to be as aware of students as they can, because there's a little bit of a barrier. You can't walk over to a student and interact. So we have built and iterated on, and this is what I've seen today, is that the ways which we reach students, have them submit little video clips, have these special channels for them where communication with them is available to the entire staff team, right? So we can see, like, if I'm wondering, how's a student doing? I can get a ton of information that helps me figure out how I can best help this student. So that's the part that's the most impressive is, we're in a fast-moving age in technology, and so you've got a lot of engineers working on our team. Some of it is actually this Learn platform that I showed you. That was new. It's a new iterated platform. And then really the way that when I talk to staff and I'm like, hey, I have this problem, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. Like, oh, we got that. Like, let me show you where that is. Right. And it's just, it blows my mind. Right. Every time I'm like, hey, how can I do this? I have this type of a problem. They're like, oh yeah, that problem has this name. This is what it is. Here's the process. And they show me and I'm like, wow.
I guess that's what you get for having like years and years of experience
Absolutely.
iterating on this program, as opposed to maybe, going online just during the pandemic. So,
Right.
well, you mentioned, really working towards the same like results and outcomes, as in the remote program as you do in the in-person. And Hack Reactor, I think, has always had a great history and like reputation of getting students jobs. So, I know this may not be your like specialty in the program, but are your students like landing jobs during this time? Like, what's been your experience in the last couple of months in terms of the job search?
Yeah, you could see a difference in the trend, right? If you go on Indeed, I constantly do a lot of research just to make sure I'm up to date, and when I'm working with students and introducing students to the program, that I can answer those questions well. So when I've looked, and based on the data that we've collected, also you see that companies are posting slower, right? There are not as many new openings opening up, but also an interesting trend is you do see more remote opportunities. And so what happens is that a graduate actually has an opportunity to work at places in other states, in other parts of the country that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So it's quite fascinating. So if you're performing at a high enough level where you are a pretty desirable candidate, which of course is our goal, right? Then the students can utilize the fact that they have opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise had. So this is what we do, right? When you have some sort of a challenge, you find the best way to tackle it. And getting students excited about these opportunities they couldn't have otherwise, and getting them to those opportunities is really how we're handling this.
What's the best advice that you've heard from maybe a graduate recently, or an instructor, another instructor, about how to get a job after you've graduated. Is there anything that like really successful students are doing right now to actually like sign the offer letter?
Yeah, so it's amazing. We do ask me anythings with with graduates frequently, and I believe we do it every it's got to be every 7 weeks, and they say repeatedly, emphatically, with all their heart, listen to your career services manager. This is someone, I used to call them the career coach. That's one of the changes. But they're career services manager. And they do act like a coach for you. You meet weekly with them as you're job searching, and they're making observations about how you're job searching, about your results. You show them your statistics because they teach you how to track all your data. And they can basically work with you as this real professional on how to do this job search effectively. So the biggest thing is just listen to them. They will give you individualized feedback. Just listen to them. And then the second thing is new from Crew Spence, who runs our career team. They've come up with this new program, and it's called the Career Search Program. And this is 25 hours a week of support while you job search, right? This is some of it. You don't have to do all of it. There is a minimum, but this is to give students the kind of structure that can lead to them slowing down their search, right? So, and this is phenomenal. Hearing Crew talk about this goes to the iteration thing again, right? Like, what do you do? How do you react? And so the response to a hurdle is to, okay, how can we make this better? So, they did all this study of all the data on why any student that didn't get hired, why was that, right? And they really dug into that. And they took all of that data, and I've seen, he did a presentation for us, and they have put together this program to offer the 25 hours a week of support that addresses specifically the reasons why people had difficulty.
Cool. I would imagine that right now structure is probably the number one thing that students would ask for, especially once they've graduated and they aren't getting that kind of like 9 to 5, online on Zoom every day kind of schedule. So that's really cool. Well, obviously, as the unemployment rate in the US has risen and more adults are looking for that career change, or maybe have time to start like upgrading their tech skills, we've seen a huge demand on our end of folks who are looking for a coding boot camp. I'm curious though, because with Hack Reactor, you can't just like enroll tomorrow, right? So how can those types of students take advantage of a program like Hack Reactor? Like, where do you suggest a beginner start?
Well, we teach workshops for one, and I used to teach some workshops. And so just getting some exposure to someone talking about the program can be useful. Like if you think, I think I want to do a boot camp, there are other boot camps too offer sessions where you can get a chance to like talk and ask questions with a live person, which is awesome. Now, there's a lot of beginner content out there. And so getting exposed to some of that is good. We do also have a prep program. We have a free prep program, which is actually the one that I did. And we have a paid prep program. And that walks students from early on, where you're learning about different values and variables and how to write functions and everything. And that really does bring you all the way to the point where you're recording videos of yourself live, answering coding prompts, getting ready for our technical assessment to get admitted into the program. Brings you right up to that point.
I recommend people do Hack Reactor prep even when they're not necessarily going to Hack Reactor. So yeah, I think that's a great place to start, especially for a beginner. All right, wonderful. Well, Jonathan, I mean, this is the number one question that we're getting right now, which is, why is right now a good time for someone to take a coding boot camp and make that career change into tech? Should someone just wait till everything, kind of quote unquote goes back to normal? Or what's your kind of answer to that huge question? Why is this a good time to go to a coding boot camp?
Yeah, when I think an important thing to note is, why are people waiting, right? And it's a fear, right? It's a fear and the hesitance. You don't know what's going to happen. And I've seen that over the years, right? You're always concerned about leaving behind, whether you are working like I was, and you have something and you're scared to lose that. Or, certainly if you're in a scenario where you don't, like if you've just lost your job, all the better, right? All the better to jump in right now. And even for individuals who are saying, maybe I do have something now. I'm scared. Like, if jobs aren't being posted as quickly, isn't that seriously concerning? If you look industry-wide, a lot of industries, software engineering is faring relatively well, and especially in markets. You think about markets that are trying to deliver solutions for people to work remotely, trying to create the tools that allow people to work differently. I mean, this is a time of innovation. You look at how well Zoom is doing right now, for instance, right? Companies are having to deliver results right now, and they need to hire more engineers to do that. I've had alumni reach out to me and say, like, hey, we're having these jobs opening. Like, are you interested, right? And so they'll put job postings on the alumni Slack. So now is the time to get into it rather than waiting, because one, I suspect that the person who's waiting, if they don't do it now, they're building a habit of not doing it, right? And so you want to jump on that habit, jump on it and do it now rather than building the habit of always waiting and not acting. And then the other reason is because this is a time of innovation, and now is the time to get in, and jobs are opening now. And when they, to do this type of work, and as time goes on, it's no longer going to be the time of change where people need to adapt so rapidly, right? So in a way, this is sort of like that wave of change that you probably want to jump on board for and help people innovate.
Well, I think that is the perfect place to end. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining and walking us through the Hack Reactor remote classroom, and just sharing such great advice for anyone who's going through an online boot camp or thinking about starting one. And thank you for joining. Let us know in the comments which boot camp you'd like to see a virtual classroom walkthrough next. Bye. See you on the next one.